He stood in the classroom clutching a torn piece of pride, surrounded by laughter that cut deeper than words ever could. A single assumption turned into public humiliation, and in that moment, a young boy learned how quickly the world can decide who you are allowed to be. No fists were raised, yet something was shattered in front of everyone. What no one realized was that this small act of cruelty was about to collide with a truth powerful enough to stop the room cold. When authority met its own reflection, who would be left standing? It was just another Monday morning at Lincoln Elementary. Marcus adjusted his neatly pressed uniform, backpack snug on his shoulders, ready for a day of math lessons and recess laughter. At 10 years old, he knew the routines of his classroom like the back of his hand, lining up quietly, raising his hand, always trying to do the right thing. His father, a respected 4-star general, had taught him the value of discipline and respect, though Marcus often felt the weight of others' assumptions about his family. Today, however, the usual hum of the school would shatter, and what started as a normal day would become a lesson in humiliation, and a confrontation with injustice Marcus never expected. The classroom buzzed with the quiet murmurs of students, but Marcus felt an unease settling in his chest. Today, his teacher seemed sharper, her eyes scanning the room with a subtle edge he hadn't noticed before. As Marcus raised his hand to answer a question, she paused, her gaze locking onto him in a way that made the room shrink. The words came next, slicing through the chatter like a sudden gust of wind. "Your dad can't be a general," she said, tearing up the project Marcus had spent hours on. Laughter bubbled around him, cruel and unrestrained, and the bright walls of the classroom felt suddenly like a cage. Marcus's heartbeat quickened. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the words lodged in his throat. The humiliation was raw, immediate, and suffocating. He had known that people sometimes underestimated him, assumed things about him or his family, but never like this, not so blatant, not in front of everyone. The whispers grew louder, a tide of judgment and ridicule. Marcus felt smaller with every second, trapped in a room where authority itself seemed to side against him. Yet amid the stifling shame, a spark of resolve began to flicker. He remembered his father's words, "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting even when fear is screaming at you." But how could he stand tall when the world had already bent him low? Each glance from his classmates, each smirk from the teacher felt like another brick pressing down on him. The project, now crumpled in his hands, wasn't just paper. It was pride, effort, identity, shredded in a heartbeat. Then came the subtle shift, the moment that made every nerve in the room tense. The classroom door opened. Marcus looked up instinctively. A presence filled the doorway, commanding yet quiet. Heads turned and the laughter faltered. Even the teacher's confident smirk wavered. Marcus couldn't yet see who had entered, but the air had changed, charged with something heavier than authority. It was truth approaching. The weight of what was coming pressed down, a suspense so thick it seemed to freeze the very ticking of the... Marcus's mind raced. Would she apologize? Would the room erupt in renewed ridicule? He couldn't tell yet, and every second stretched unbearably. All he knew was that the world outside his humiliation was about to collide with the classroom in a way he had never imagined. The whispers stopped, replaced by the quiet shuffle of footsteps, deliberate, measured, unstoppable. And then, just as he thought he might have to bear this alone, a voice cut through the tension, a presence that changed everything, a force that even the teacher hadn't anticipated. The footsteps stopped. The air seemed to thicken, each second stretching unbearably. Marcus's eyes widened as he finally saw who had entered, the man whose name carried weight in every corner of the country, whose presence alone demanded respect. The 4-star general, Marcus's father, stood at the doorway, his uniform crisp, medals gleaming, and a gaze that could cut through pretense like a blade. The laughter had died instantly, even the teach. Time felt suspended. Marcus's chest heaved, a mix of relief and lingering fear coursing through him. The teacher who had moments ago wielded power like a weapon now faltered, her words caught in her throat. Silence enveloped the room, but it wasn't comforting. It was electric, charged with accountability that had arrived at last. Marcus felt every heartbeat as if it echoed through the walls, a drum marking the turning point from humiliation to recognition. Then, in a voice low but undeniable, his father addressed the room. Not with anger, but with authority that demanded attention, with a presence that left no room for excuses. Every eye in the classroom turned, every whisper halted. The injustice that had seemed insurmountable moments ago now faced its reckoning. Marcus realized, in that instant, that the humiliation he had endured wasn't just personal. It was a mirror of a larger truth, a reality of assumptions and prejudice that society allowed too often. The teacher's expression shifted from smug confidence to stunned silence. Marcus's classmates sat frozen, watching a scene that had gone from ordinary to unforgettable. He felt a rush of emotion, fear, pride, and disbelief all at once. The moment had arrived when the world seemed to tilt, when authority met accountability, and when courage, small but unyielding, was recognized. Marcus's gaze met his father's. No words were needed. The room held its breath, waiting, uncertain, charged. And as the door closed behind the four-star general, a question hung in the air, one Marcus would carry with him forever. Could the courage to stand, even when humiliated, ever truly change the world? The classroom slowly returned to its ordinary hum, but Marcus knew nothing would ever feel ordinary again. The laughter that had once cut so deeply now seemed distant, like a shadow he had outgrown. His father's presence had shifted more than just the teacher's stance. It had shifted the balance of respect, of recognition, of truth. Marcus realized that courage could take many forms, sometimes quiet, sometimes waiting for the right moment to make itself known. Yet the lesson extended far beyond the walls of the classroom. The humiliation he endured was not unique. It echoed the countless moments of prejudice and bias that ripple through schools, workplaces, and communities every day. Marcus understood, with a clarity no child should have to learn, that injustice often hides behind authority, routines, and unspoken assumptions. But it can also be challenged, confronted, and changed. Walking home that day, Marcus felt a weight lift, but also a new awareness settle in. He carried not just the memory of shame, but a sense of possibility, the power of standing tall, even when the world tries to knock you down. He carried the truth that visibility matters, that one act of courage can ripple into change, and that even in moments of humiliation, dignity can be reclaimed. This story isn't just Marcus's. It's a mirror, reflecting the systemic challenges many face every day, and a reminder that silence only allows injustice to persist. So the question remains, not for him, but for all of us. When will we stand against the assumptions, the biases, and the cruelties we see before the next Marcus faces the same walls?